Hi, I'm Tim, CEO, founder of Aplos Software. I've helped start a number of nonprofits and worked at a church for a number of years. So I've gone through this startup process a bunch of times. It's not as difficult as it seems. When you do your first one, it's challenging. When you do the second one, it's like, oh, I remember how to do all this stuff. And after you've done a few of them, you realize if I just know the steps and the checklist, then it's pretty easy to do. All right, so how to start a nonprofit?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of steps and there's a lot that you need to do, and you ought to do it in a certain order when you're starting a nonprofit. So I think the first place to start, as maybe silly as this sounds, is starting to think of a name. A lot of times you'll think of a name or want to start a nonprofit, and then that name is already registered, or there's no website that you can get with the name in it, that kind of thing. And so you can start to brainstorm the type of name that you want, and then do domain checks, see if the name is available. You want to submit an application that has the name filled out. If the name's taken, it gets spit back to you. So a lot of times you'll want to check to see if this name's available before you turn in your application. That way it's easy, you know it's going to go through. So you've got the name of the entity that you'd like to start. The first thing is to kind of bring that name or that thing, that nonprofit, into existence. So how you do that is with the Secretary of State. It's a state agency. There's one in every state. And you basically file what are called Articles of Incorporation with the Secretary of State. Essentially what you're doing is you're creating a corporation, and then you're going to make it nonprofit later, but you form a corporation. So these Articles of Incorporation, it's articles. It's a one-page for the most part. I think each state may have its own regulations on this, but it's a document. In the state of California, it's a one-page document, and it has very specific information that needs to be in the Articles of Incorporation. Things like your name and address, but there's some specific language you have to use. And so you can look up online and look for Articles of Incorporation templates, that kind of thing. And so you draft this thing, and this one-page document has the name, the address, and some other specifics in it. You go to the Secretary of State, and you turn it in. They look up, make sure the name's available. Assuming it is, you give them their filing fee, and then boom, it's a corporation. So now it exists. They give you a stamped copy of your Articles of Incorporation. You're going to need that later to do things like open a bank account. And they give you a state ID number, basically. Some cities won't have a Secretary of State office, and so you'd want to reach out. You either got to drive to an office that does exist, or you can reach out to these companies who have an office across the street from the Secretary of State, and that's what they do. You ask them to walk it across the street for you. So there's companies out there that do that. Once you have the corporation created, then you're really kind of on the track then to turning the corporation into a nonprofit entity. It exists at the state at this point. It's in the state's records. You have an ID number. It doesn't exist at the federal kind of land yet. So you need an employer identification number or an EIN number. And so you can do that on the internet. There's forms that you can fill out and mail in. There's also even an 800 number. You can call the IRS, dial through this thing, give them the information, and then you get your EIN number on the phone, and then they'll email it to you. So it's super easy to get your EIN. So at that point, the entity exists with the federal government as well. And the next step is to try and take this corporation and turn it into a tax-exempt corporation. This is called filing a tax-exempt application with the IRS, and the application is the Form 1023, which is available on the IRS website. This application basically walks you through getting tax-exempt status. The tax-exempt status a lot of times is interchangeable with 501c3 status. If you go to the IRS website or Google IRS Form 1023, you'll get a PDF document. If you scroll to the very bottom of that document, the last page of the document is a 1023 checklist. And that basically includes everything that you need to complete in order to send in your application to then try and get tax exempt status for your corporation. Tax exempt status basically means that your corporation doesn't have to pay taxes on its net income. It does not exempt you from sales tax, property tax, all of the other kinds of taxes. It is an exemption from income tax. If you get this 501c3 status, then it also means that the donations made to this entity are tax deductible. So that means the donor can write those donations off as a deduction on their personal taxes. Separate from that is I got the income as a nonprofit and I didn't spend any money out of net income. I don't have to pay tax on that. So I'm tax exempt and they get a tax deduction. So that's kind of what that is.